Hello and welcome to another video trying to get you the very top grades. Today our focus is on subject terminology and I'm going to teach you 6 things that will help you get the top grades here. So first we'll look at what both AQA and Edexcel say subject terminology is. Then we'll look at what exam boards complain about. The examiners really don't like the way students write about verbs, adverbs, adjectives and nouns, and I'll show you why that is. Next, I'll show you how these parts of speech, the verbs, adjectives, adverbs and nouns, can be written about in a way that gets you high marks. Then I'm going to show you what subject terminology really means. It's much more than writing about parts of speech. And finally, I'm going to teach you what subject terminology to write about the key text that you're studying. So novels, plays and poetry. Okay, first up is my translation of the assessment objectives. Edexcel are in italics, AQA are in bold. And you'll see that subject terminology is crucial to assessment objective 2 in both, but in Edexcel it also counts in assessment objective 1, and it's doubly important. Now really that's also true for the examiner of AQA, because if you make mistakes with terminology it just makes you sound less articulate and you're likely not to get as high marks. I'm not going to read all this out to you, by the way. I'm showing you extracts from the guide to the literature exam that I've just finished writing, so you're getting some portions of it for free here, because that's why I make the videos. And what's interesting when you look at the mark scheme is grade 5 only needs some relevant use of terminology. So if you pay attention in this video, you're going beyond grade 5 straight away. Now the crucial bit of learning is that at grade 6, your terminology needs to be relevant and appropriate. Okay, let's now look at the problems about writing about parts of speech. So imagine you've got this sentence to analyse. The young man choked, spluttered, coughed, and finally exploded with rage. Now, an example of using terminology which is meaningless and gets you no marks is to look at it and think, oh, I'm going to write about this word choked. Oh, what part of speech is it? Oh, it's a verb. Right, I'll put that in my answer. The verb choked implies how upset the young man is, so that his rage is presented as self-destructive. Now, that's a really good sentence, a good analysis. I'm giving 2 reasons why I'm focusing on the word choked, which is great. I'm going to get high marks for it, but I'm not getting extra marks for mentioning that choked is a verb. And the reason for that is it doesn't matter that it's a verb to make this point. So I would score exactly the same by writing this sentence. Choked implies how upset the young man is, so that his rage is presented as self-destructive. I'm not saying anything extra in my interpretation by mentioning the verb. Now, I don't lose any marks by putting that in. However, very often students will put in the adverb or the noun, and it's just completely wrong, and so they misidentify it. So you lose marks by getting it wrong, and you don't gain any marks by getting it right. Okay, let's go back to the sentence and work out how to write about terminology in a meaningful way. So I've highlighted in yellow the verbs that are in that sentence. And now I'm going to ask myself, right, can I write about the meaning of this and link it to the idea of the writing using lots of verbs like this in a list? Well, I can. It dramatizes the violence of what this young man is feeling, doesn't it? So I can write about this increasing sense of violence, the dramatization, and link it maybe to the word exploded, which brings that violence to a climax. So now in my sentence I'm going to write about the verbs, but in a meaningful way. The writer compresses a list of violent verbs in one sentence in order to convey the young man's escalation of rage, which quickly reaches a climax with exploded. So now I've written about it with appropriate terminology. which you will remember, appropriate terminology, was one of the characteristics of grade 6. For grade 7, the examiners described the terminology as judicious, which is a bit of a bizarre word, because what does that mean that's different from appropriate? Well, in the examiner's head here, is judicious kind of means a really exact, a really precise, perhaps a slightly surprising way of using that terminology. And here you can see that I've looked at a list of verbs, and that's going to surprise the examiner slightly because it is so precise. These are verbs which are being used in a list, but what kind of a list? One that escalates. So this is really precise, which is really what judicious means here. And so I'm easily able to get into grade 7. Now, in this instance, it really does pay to know what my verbs and adverbs and adjectives and nouns are. But if I write about one individually, I'm not going to get the marks. If I think about how the writer uses them together, then I will get the marks. Okay, well, test this out for yourself. Let's read my new sentence. Slowly, cautiously, softly, and perhaps with a little cowardice, he put the key in the lock. So first, test yourself. Can you recognise the parts of speech that are slowly, cautiously, and softly? Next, can you write about them together? What's the effect of having them together? Well, what I'd like to do here is offer you the opportunity to write your analysis sentence, post it in the comments below, and I'll mark it for you. As you can see here, I do reply to most of the comments that I receive on YouTube. And in fact, I'm making this video in response to Small Shots, who wrote to me, "What does academic language mean, sir?" And I wrote back, "It means subject terminology," and here I am showing you in a video. Right, the next thing we need to think about is, what does subject terminology actually mean? Well, it means this. These are the words that a student of literature needs in order to discuss literary texts. So these are words that will be used at A-level and university, okay? It's whatever these words are that a proper student of literature will need to use. And that's much broader than parts of speech. Let me show you. So the most common ones are words which explain meaning. They're words which you use instead of the word shows. So reveals, portrays, signifies, symbolizes, suggests, implies, interpretation, writing about a character as a construct. All those words that you can use in every single essay, whether it's poetry, play or novel that you're writing about, are all appropriate use of subject terminology and will get you into grade 6. Simple as that. And obviously, if you're writing about all of these, you're offering very interesting interpretations which will get you even higher than grade 6. Right, well next there are common features to all of those texts. So these are words again that you'll be able to use in any essay. Symbol, when you talk about the symbolism of anything in a text, that is subject terminology. You will always be able to write about the characterization of people. You will find personification in every text that you read, and similarly you'll find simile, alliteration. Now we get into some really interesting ones here. Contrast, which isn't fully explained by teachers, I find. It means virtually the same as juxtaposition. Look out for my videos on that. I'll probably put a link up here. They're really powerful ways to get into grade 7. Similarly, writing about allusion. I've got a lot in my guide about that. Then some more easy ones. Portrayal, how something is portrayed. Use of repetition. The writer's tone. This is an easy way to get up into grade 7. Thinking about what mood the writer is creating. Tone means mood here. Irony is another grade 7 use of terminology, and it will be a grade 7 interpretation that you're offering. Nearly all texts have some dramatic irony in them. Not every single one, I might have cheated a bit there. And nearly every text has an element of pathetic fallacy. So these are easy ways for you to get into the top grades. And then we have the grade 6 words that you need for each kind of text. So for plays, you want to be using these words: scene, setting, entrance and exit, soliloquy, monologue, couplet, iambic pentameter, prop, tension, climax, resolution, and stage directions. And not only will you get the marks for using these words accurately, they will also lead you to write something meaningful about the author's purpose. So just imagine if you started writing about why a character exits at the moment that they do. That's actually a high grade skill. Let me give you an example. Even if you haven't studied Macbeth, Lady Macbeth has a suicide which happens off stage. So her exit is actually the sleepwalking scene. So a really interesting exam answer will explore why Shakespeare only has her with this nightmare sleepwalking scene and then kills her off stage. You can write some really interesting interpretations about his view of women, what he's saying about the patriarchal society and so on. Similarly, you might be writing about a monologue where a character just speaks and no one interrupts them. Well, you can say a lot about what the writer expects us to think about that character because no one is allowed to interrupt them. It says a lot about the power of that character or their self-importance. So hopefully you can see how these words get you the grade 6 because you're using them accurately, but then get you into grade 7 because you link them to interpretation. In novels, you have those same ones, possibly slightly, but there's these common ones. Novella, so Jekyll and Hyde is a novella. So is A Christmas Carol. So is The Sign of Four. Chapter, rising tension, the idea that tension is getting greater as you move through the text. The denouement, which is the climax at the end. And this is another one of those grade 7 things. If you start writing about how the writer gives us a climax at the end of the novel, you'll be linking that to an interpretation. Resolution, that again is about the ending and how the problems presented in the novel are finally resolved or not fully resolved. For example, what in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, what does Utterson, our narrator, do next? That is a lack of a resolution that will lead you to very interesting interpretations. Narrative, narrator, omniscient, a narrator who can see everything. You can get some very good interpretations by looking at what the author, the narrator tells us and doesn't tell us. All novels are written in prose, so you can use that technical vocabulary. Exposition, where the writer tells us the backstory. So exposition is the formal way of saying backstory. Flashback, foreshadowing, and contemporary, because writers are always writing about the reader at the time, and that's where it's got temp, temp, as in the Latin for time, tempus. So contemporary of the time. And this you will have studied in many of your texts, foreshadowing. Now, lots of these words help you describe the structure. And when you write about the structure of text, you get higher marks. You immediately get into grade 7 because you're saying, why does this happen here instead of here? What's the effect of that on the reader? So let's look at those structure words. Denouement, exposition, flashback, foreshadowing. All technical vocabulary, subject terminology that will get you the top grades. And then finally, this is a list of words that you can use in poetry, many of which you might not have come across. But all these are extracts from my guide, and everything in the guide explains all of these fully. I'm not going to do that here on the video. And also, Google's free, you can just look them up. But these are the words: rhyme, blank verse, trochee and dactyl, iambic pentameter, syllable, half rhyme, enjambment, caesura, couplet, rhythm, song, ballad, sonnet, volta, quatrain, stanza, verse, anaphora. All those words are easy ways for you to get subject terminology into your essay writing. If we think further about which ones will ask you to write about the structure that will get you the higher grades. Well, actually, all of these are structure. So down to couplet, that's all structure, all of those. And so all of those will get you into the top grades. Another structure one is the volta and the anaphora, but if you don't know what they are, get Googling or look out for my guide. Right, hopefully you revise from my videos by taking notes. So there are 7 things to take notes about now. Go back over what you've heard and make a brief note about each of these so that you can nail subject terminology in your essays. If you would like to do any practice writing, post it in the comments below and I'll take a look at it, so you can see how you're developing in your use of subject terminology. As I said, look out for my guide if you want more help on the whole of the literature exam. So thank you very much. Do subscribe if you'd like to get top grades, and post me those comments so I can get marking your work. See you soon on my channel.